Thank you for your time. You've always taught me. You've taught me a lot. Not only did you teach me forensics, but I think you taught me a way of thinking about things. A methodical way of thinking about things.
That's very gracious of you.
There's a few things I want to ask you in that regard. Liver cirrhosis, drug overdose, mainly opioids, and suicide. They are called deaths of despair, and it seems to be the symptom of an underlying problem as opposed to the problem itself. What is your sentiment in that regard?
I think what we're looking at is an increasingly stressed society. I think a society in which the pressures become greater and greater in all respects, making a living, depersonalization of society, the roboticization of society, families breaking up, splitting off. These are all things that I think play a role in leading to this stressful society that we have. And then you have changes on the medical side, the idea that people should not have to suffer. We're going to take care of it. And it's very easy. You're going to write the prescription.
It seems to be that we are self-medicating. We are 4.7% of the world's population. We take 80 to 90% of the world's OxyContin and hydrocodone.
It's incredible.
I'm pretty sure we don't have 80 to 90% of the world's pain.
How about when I'm looking at a 62-year-old woman lying on the table, and, she's perfectly healthy looking, and I'm thinking, my God, this could be, somebody's mother. This could be somebody's grandmother. And most Americans, I think, do not yet understand it's proportionately white between 35 to 55.
I mean, do you think there should be this idea of stress being an actual diagnosis? Because it seems like this very nebulous term.
You have A is the immediate cause of death. And then you have another box of contributing causes. That is certainly where stress should be listed.
And you look at the main stress hormones that we secrete, and it's the same exact chemicals in a lizard, in a fish, in a bird. This is like ancient biology. For 99% of beasts out there, what stress is about is 3 minutes of some screaming crisis where somebody's very intent on eating you, or you're very intent on eating somebody, and everything that your body does at that time makes perfect sense. You increase your heart rate, your blood pressure, your breathing rate. You turn off everything that's not essential. You shut down growth and tissue repair. Lions chasing you. You're running for your life, and one of the things you're doing is all sorts of metabolic stuff to hand energy to your thigh muscles. Oh my God, you think about only 3 months until taxes are due, and you divert energy to your thigh muscles. It makes no sense whatsoever, and that's where you pay the price.
Hello.
How are you?
How you doing?
Good.
Nice to see you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you. Shoes okay?
Yeah.
Dr. Robert Sapolsky is sort of this Indiana Jones-like character. Goes off and lives with baboons for 20 years in Africa. And then he comes out and he writes this book, Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. If you're a zebra and a lion's chasing you, you want stress in order to get away. But once you get away, then the stress levels return to normal. Stress is not the enemy here. It's the constant, never-ending, toxic stress. That's the stress that'll kill you. I always wonder how, just when you're not talking about stress, if you, in fact, were experiencing stress.
Unbelievable amounts, yeah. I've had a transition in recent years. I closed my lab about 4 years ago. So rather than like the usual escape of becoming a dean or a chair or something or other, I've just been hiding out here writing. I think what we know by now from baboon world is what makes psychological stress really corrosive. Lack of control, lack of predictability, lack of social support. If you're chronically stressed, you've chronically increased your blood pressure. You're going to get more fluid turbulence with the movement into your blood vessels. They hit the walls. They pound the walls. They cause microscopic little bits of scarring, tearing. You get inflammation there. And you get plaques. And you got the whole cascade there. It's a fairly straight line biologically from chronic stress to your blood pressure is chronically elevated. It's a much more indirect route to liver cirrhosis.
Some of this may sound more basic for you, but I'm wondering when you think about what's happening in the United States now, these spikes in different causes of death among the white working class, liver cirrhosis, opioid overdose, and suicide. Do you think stress is the root problem here?
Oh, absolutely. Our lives are more psychologically corroded by stress. Stress, am I valued? Stress, do I have a meaningful place in the community? Stress, is there even a community I can ever rely upon? Stress, why am I here?
I've often wondered what our great-great-grandkids would say about the lives that we led. They'd probably say that we lived in a world that was changing faster than ever before. I think in many ways we'd say that the wealth of the nation was pretty good. When it comes to health, it actually becomes a much harder thing to describe. You'd look at things like obesity rates, you'd look at cancer rates, you'd look at heart disease. But there'd be this underlying current that'd be much harder to define, which is this real state of stress.
Everybody wants a pill. Sometimes we just don't have a pill to make you better.
We demand more drugs. We take more drugs than any other country in the world. There's no question those drugs can save lives, but nearly 50 Americans die every day from prescription painkillers. What does stress look like?
Stress is ugly. Stress is something that can cause issues in every area of your life.
Close your eyes. There we go. What's up, furry girl?
In Victoria, Texas, I met Angela. She's a mother, she's a wife, she's a nurse, and she's being prescribed a huge cocktail of meds for her stress.
Here, let me grab his clothes. I lost my second child, and I was full term, and that's when I really started to look for ways to cope with what I was going through. I took pain medication, hydrocodone, and I took the Xanax for the anxiety.
She'd be acting different. It got worse after we lost a child, and has just steadily gotten worse since then.
It's come to where I take way more than I'm supposed to. Even the other night I was sitting there thinking, maybe I should just take all of these and just go to sleep.
It's hard to hear and to think about how many Americans have been led down this path of drug dependence. I know many people who've been helped by antidepressants and other medications, but then ultimately at the end of the day, these premature deaths, they are all a reflection of the stress, the pain that comes with that stress, and the desire to, in some ways, medicate it away, even to the point where it could be dangerous and it could end your life.
You put two capuchin monkeys side by side, and there's a very simple task that they need to do. And if you give both of them cucumber for the task, they're perfectly willing to do this 25 times in a row. If you give them grapes, that's a far better food, then you create inequity between them. The one on the left is the monkey who gets cucumber. The one on the right is the one who gets grapes. So she gives a rock to us, that's the task. And we give her a piece of cucumber and she eats it. The other one needs to give a rock to us. That's what she does. And she gets a grape. And she eats it. The other one sees that. She gives a rock to us now. Gets again cucumber. She tests a rock now against the wall. She needs to give it to us. and she gets cucumber again. So we're getting very close to the human sense of fairness. The reaction, especially this reaction, this is so primate-like and so human-like. I think people very much recognize that response that we all have to inequality.
When humans invented socioeconomic status, we found a way of subordinating our have-nots like no primate has ever come up with before. What's the surest way to make people feel poor? Put them in a lot of income inequity. Have them surrounded by all the stuff they don't have. Rub their noses in it over and over. It's a sledgehammer that overwhelms any of these sort of individual coping styles.
I'm stressed because there is a city full of jobs out there and I don't have one of them.
What does it say about us that we need these rage rooms to try and relieve our stress? It's become a fast-growing business.
I just think there's so many demands on people now.
Could it be that a society gets so stressed out that it actually starts to break?
It's not that wealth doesn't buy you health, it does. The wealthy are better off than people at the bottom, always, in every country. But what's remarkable is that in a wealthy country like the United States, that people at the top 10% or top 25%, they are not the healthiest people in the world. And they're not the healthiest by a long shot.
The evidence is inequalities in society affect the level of health for everybody. The greater the inequality, the lower the levels of trust, of social cohesion, the higher the levels of social isolation.
In human populations, loneliness is associated with considerable morbidity and mortality. And we've developed a monkey model of loneliness. And what seems to be happening with these animals is that they seem to be experiencing stress as a result of this. So individuals that are lonely are more likely to die from a number of different kinds of factors.
Animals who were connected to a lot of animals, and those animals were connected to a lot of animals, were actually kind of protected. And so what we think is going on here is actually social buffering, and it gets at an individual's susceptibility. So it's the idea that if you have a lot of really good, solid relationships, it kind of helps you maintain a healthy physiology. And if you look at the evolutionary history, we've been in social groups so long that it actually is part of our biology. And there's a lot of research that shows that when you don't have that, it can be really, really damaging.
Looking at female baboons out in the wild who had just lost a close relative, corticoid levels go through the roof. They're grieving exactly as a human, and they increase their social grooming and their close social relationships, their close relatives, and the ones who do that recover faster.
I mean, we've known for a while that people who live in tight social structures have better health. There was this famous study out of a small town in Pennsylvania which directly showed how living in a close-knit community helped reduce heart disease.
So the Rosito studies is a more than 50-year-long follow-up of Italian-American immigrants from Rosito, Pennsylvania. They appeared to have half the heart attack rates of the rest of America, including neighboring towns.
Here is a community within the United States that has a strikingly low death rate from heart attack, which is the major killer in the United States.
So they went about finding out everything they could about the citizens of Rosito, measuring their blood pressure, taking their cholesterol levels and diet and so forth. None of these things could explain their health advantage. The people in Rosito seemed to smoke at about the same rate as people in neighboring towns. They had, cholesterol levels that were exactly the same. In the end, they settled on one factor, which is the magical ingredient, which is the opposite of stress: social support and social cohesion.
People are not only happier, but they're more effective and they're healthier if they're interested in each other.
Interestingly, today we still see something like a Rossetto effect with Hispanics, who actually live longer than whites and blacks. They even have a name for it. It's called the Hispanic paradox.
Well, the other half of the story is that as Rosito became more Americanized, their advantage in heart disease mortality gradually got whittled away until today it looks exactly the same as neighboring communities.
Of course, there is a lot about life in Rossetto that we might find unacceptable today. The answer is not to go back, but to take what is valuable and move forward. Namely, this idea that in order to best care for ourselves, we have to care for each other.
Do you get back in the field much? My last season was 8 years ago, and that turned out to be the last one. After 32 years, the sort of things kind of collapsed there. Most of my animals got shot by rangers.
When you look to the animal world and think about what's happening in the United States now, are you optimistic?
Well, there's definitely some grounds for hope, since one of the big themes in neuroscience is very little is set in stone. There's a study of mine from some years back, and this was my main baboon troop that I had been sort of living with intermittently for 20 years at that point. The baboon troop next door had a tourist lodge in their territory that opened up a big garbage dump. Soon they were in there feasting off tossed food each day. Along comes this TB outbreak, and it killed all of my males who went over there. Half the males are dead, but the most important thing is, who are the males who survived? The guys who weren't aggressive, the guys who would rather sit in a room with somebody in the morning than punch it out with someone for some thrown out cake from last night's dinner. This became a troop with extremely low levels of aggression, and the most extraordinary thing is that as new males would come in who grew up in the big bad real baboon world, it would take them about 6 months to take on this behavioral style. And it took one generation to completely upend this picture of what's inevitable in a social system. And somewhere in there is some room for optimism.